Good evening, everybody. We're so pleased to have our panelists and to have our audience behind this very interesting news screen. And tonight we wish to rethink, so you'll be rethinking and thinking with us. And on behalf of the Haifa International Film Festival, this is our 36th edition. We welcome all our guests. We thank you for being here. And I would like to usher in Eran Polishuk, our curator of this meeting, which we consider actually a work session. So I would suggest for the audience, as well as I will do it, to have a notebook and just jot down some of your pointers and your advice, some of our questions, and simply enjoy. Eran Polishuk, please introduce yourself and your guest, and the stage is yours.
Thank you, Ruti, and shalom, and good evening, and welcome everyone to the panel about rethinking distribution at the Haifa 36 International Film Festival. My name is Eran Polishuk, and I'm going to talk about it later. That last January, I launched my own distribution company. Everything was looked very, very promising, and then 2 months later, it came, the pandemic started, and then we had to start think. And Ruti, I think, and also to our panelists, I think there is nothing more than Ruti and me would love to be now with our friends in Haifa at the annual celebration, the cinematic celebration, a wonderful film festival, but this is it, and we're under lockdown. But luckily, from an hybrid film festival, the festival didn't give up, and they moved to an online edition. And I'm happy to say that we have more than 110 people in this webinar, not just filmmakers, also international film festival directors and also international distributors. So after this webinar is finished, please, all of you, go to the website of Haifa Film Festival. You can see the Israeli films in the documentary, best film in the documentary competition, and please have a look. Maybe you're going to take one of those films.
Thank you, Ran. And if you're already talking about our films, also our industry events, we have our international pitching tomorrow. It's a very interesting event. And if you're talking about the Haifa Film Festival, I would like to personally thank the Haifa Film Festival and its team for not giving up this year. It was touch and go. So yeah, thank you, everybody.
Okay, so we said it's going to be 19 minutes because we're very greedy, but we will see how the energy feels. And I'm going to do a short introduction of our panelists. You can see all our viewers, it's in the website. So I'm going to start with our panelists in the city that is closer to us, New York. It's just 6,000 miles from here, from Tel Aviv. So good afternoon, Wendy Liddell, the wonderful Wendy Liddell, Senior Vice President of Kino Lorber. Hi, Wendy, good to see you. Hello. And Kino Lorber, they're doing an amazing job for so many years. They're releasing documentaries, arthouse films, political films, narrative features. I think from the Israeli perspective, I remember last year's Synonyms that did very, very well at the international arena and also in the States. Tom of Finland, another Israeli perspective, Amos Gitai's films, as well as Sandstorm a few years ago. And I see on the block next to Wendy, I see Michael. So I'm Michael Rosenberg, the president.
Hi.
Good afternoon. So the president of Film Movement, another very established distribution company. From the Israeli perspective, you distribute the wonderful Fresh film that I'm not sure, I think it was in Haifa, In Between by my Salum Hamoud. And it's, I really like to go over box office mojo. And I think this film is, speaking Arabic, did quite well. So congratulations. And you also had Advocate last year that was shortlisted for Best Documentary at the Oscar. And one of my favorite films of last year, Corpus Christi. So hi, Michael. Now we're gonna go up. Also for Michael, I can see Tom Alexander from Mongrel Media in Toronto, Canada. Hi, Tom, good to see you.
Hey, man.
And your company that is doing a wonderful job and you're releasing so many films. Also, you're the Canadian distributor of Neon and Sony Picture Classics, and some titles of A24 and IFC Films. And I would love to hear your take. Usually us, we're really looking about the States, but Canada is such an important territory, and would love to hear about your take on differences in distribution. Now I'm going to jump from Toronto. We're going to Wichita, Kansas. We have Lela Med O'Connor. Hi, Lela. It's good to see you, and thank you for joining us in this last minute. And Lela has many, many hats. You can see it all in her bio in the website. She's here in her role as the director of the Film Festival Alliance, and particularly, Lela, later we would love to hear about the work of the Alliance. Now I'm jumping to California, to our friends in LA. We have Eric Deberlof here. I'm sorry that I said it wrongly. Eric, thank you so much for joining us. Roadside Attractions, such a wonderful, great company with amazing titles. Manchester by the Sea. I can think about, you know what? All these films, now I'm not thinking about films. I think about Oscar nominations, because your company is dealing with so many big titles, big films. And I wanted you to participate tonight because a few years ago when I met you, I was like astonished. You took the film The Wedding Plan. So I would love later when we're gonna elaborate this question to our other panelists about picking Israeli films. So thank you so much, Eric, for joining us.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And good morning. And last but not least, we have Kelly Argraves here. Hi, Kelly. Somewhere in California, I'm not sure where.
Changing, depending on the air. I move. The fires.
The fires.
So
I was just going to ask if you've been evacuated.
No, I'm just living in a cloud of gray, ash. Yeah.
So Kelly is also many, many hats, like all. Please later our participants go over the bios, wherever, like the big guns of America, of North American film industry. And Kelly here as a director of doing marketing and publicity, mostly for first run features and also outsider pictures and many others. So this is our team, this is our panelists, and Guti is here with me to moderate this panel. I'm going to start straight, and every time I'm going to refer the question for a few of you, so we will have much more questions. So I'm going to start. I'm going to talk about, I'm really curious because film festival, and this is a film festival, Haifa. So I'm going to start with Lela and Tom. And Tom, you're like one of the lucky ones. You're in Toronto. You actually participated at a film festival, TIFF, the wonderful TIFF, Toronto International Film Festival.
Physically, you mean?
And I have to say, physically, yeah, unless someone else is gonna tell us he participated in a film festival. So I have to say TIFF is the most Israeli friendly film festival every year, between 5 to 8 and some years even 12 film festivals. So Tom and Lela, Tom, first, I would love to hear your reactions from this year's TIFF that was outside, from 400 films here, it was like 460, if I'm not mistaken. Another atmosphere, just you, the Canadian gang. And then Lela, we would love you to elaborate about the work of the Film Festival Alliance. Here in Israel, we have, I think, only 8 to 10 film festival tops. And in the States, you have so many. It's so important from us later, Lela, for you to tell us about the film festivals today. So please, Tom, start to tell us about this year's TIFF. How was it?
It was nothing like any other TIFF you've ever seen. Physically, it was quiet. I mean, by quiet, I mean it was dead. I mean, there was nobody around, literally. We had 5 films playing, 3 of which were playing physically, as well as online. The other 2 were just online only. And at the venue at Bell Lightbox, which is the home of TIFF, there was, normally, of course, it's packed, the streets are full, huge lineups. There was literally nobody, empty. And they were not allowing people to be lining up inside the venue. So you get in there and there's just, a handful of staff, and the auditorium capacity was maxed out at 50 people. So we did have a couple of the films were Canadian. So we had some local talent who were actually at the theater, but very, very muted, very, very quiet. I'm sure most of the people on the panel were partaking into virtually, so we all know what that was like. which was great. I think TIFF was quite happy that they had better ticket sales than they were anticipating, and certainly the market was robust. But on the ground, you would never have recognized it. Just completely dead. Very simple.
So what basically you're saying that the ticket sales were surprisingly higher?
Online.
Or not that
Online. I mean, most theaters were technically sold out at 50 max. Plus they had the drive-in screenings. I was at the opening drive-in screening of the Spike Lee film, which was great. And it was a great choice for a drive-in opening film, being primarily a concert film. But yeah, it was like nothing you've ever seen in terms of a festival.
Okay, so from a festival perspective, that feels not like
there was no electricity in the air. There was no excitement. There couldn't be. There's nothing.
No excitement.
TIFF did an excellent job. TIFF did an absolutely fantastic job of in terms of logistics, managing everything on the ground, cleanliness, all the right public health measures. I thought their programming was very good for what it was, given that they did not have access to a lot of larger films. But yeah, it was bizarre. I mean, I only physically went to TIFF 3 times. I spent the rest of the week watching stuff just like everybody else.
Wow. Okay, so here we're jumping here to Lela. I'm happy to hear that TIFF did quite okay on online. And please, first of all, please tell us about the work of the Film Festival Alliance, and then later maybe to tell us what's going on now in your alliance and what's up.
I'd like to add, why do you need also a Film Festivals Alliance? I'm thinking, for instance, in Israel, should we have a Film Festivals Alliance? Do we have common aims, common issues, etc.?
Well, of course, this year, now more than ever, we needed the Film Festival Alliance. But the Alliance is made up of 200 plus festivals from around North America, from Sundance to Seattle to Cleveland to Milwaukee, all the regional festivals that play many, many international films for their communities, and then lots of individual programmers who wear many hats at different festivals across the country as well. So the Alliance has existed for several years, but really now this year more than ever served as a networking place for people to really share ideas and information about this huge, pivot that we've all had to make. We started these weekly calls the week actually that South by canceled. We had our first call, and we opened it up to everyone, including non-members. And the whole conversation was about people saying, I'm going to go to South by. Are you going to South by? And it was just as the COVID was starting to happen. And then literally an hour later, South by canceled. So for the whole summer, we did weekly calls every Friday, bringing together festivals, from all over the country, talking about their experiences, talking about various platforms. Where it started off, everyone thinking this was a sprint, it really has turned into a marathon. And everybody recognizes that now, from festivals to filmmakers. Even up until September, I think there were fall festivals that thought they were going to go physical. Most festivals, I'm happy to report, within the Alliance actually happened and or are happening. There were very, very few that postponed or pivoted, or decided to cancel. Some went all drive-in, which was a lot of work as well, but nearly all of them, and there's many, many coming up this month, are going virtual. And have lots of lessons to have learned from the spring festivals. And I think, again, your question about why is the Alliance necessary, it's because people are able to come together and share this information, especially in a time like now where we need to know, everything's changed, from programming to marketing to audiences. It's all different. And this is a group of people who's really willing to come together and, put their best practices and, the fires that happened, but also the triumphs that happened, to make sure that, the festival industry continues in some way. And I should mention that most of the festivals that are part of the Alliance are not market festivals. And there's a big difference between the regional festivals and the market festivals and the community-driven festivals, and they serve very different purposes. So for the festivals that have been really part of these conversations, it's really about how to continue engaging audiences, and that's where I really feel like we all need to work together. Is working together to figure out how to engage audiences. There's so much content out there, and how we can use these trusted curatorial voices so that films are actually seen by people.
Wonderful. And from this virtual, I just want to say off topic, you said South by, that was South by Southwest in March in Austin. That was the first major mega event that was postponed in the beginning. And I remember everyone was astonished. Now you say, they're postponing it. Like it feels just 7 months later, and we understand this is what's going now. So we can be optimistic, but we don't want to be pessimistic. But we want to be realistic. This is the situation, and now where we think about it. And so from this, and I want to say that also all this business that with all the pandemic, all the layers of cynicism and snobism, it feels like there is no one community that really helps each other. And I'm happy to bring into the panel Wendy and Michael, that I remember when I thought about this panel, you were the first that I thought to bring on, because the steps that you did in the beginning of the pandemic was overwhelming. And I'm talking about the virtual cinema to help the art house theaters, and of course as a business. So Wendy, if you can please start, and Michael continue about the work you did both in Kino Lorber and Film Movement, once you did the next step after the pandemic started.
I think we at Kino Lorber and at Film Movement, I think we had the same idea at the same time. I think it's because we had both released films on March 6th, and then the theaters shut down. So it was really a kind of a survivalist pivot, but it was also a choice that we made as small companies who handle explicitly art house films to work with our partners at the art house theaters rather than to go straight to a premium VOD release, because we wanted to share, it was partly selfish, part altruistic, but we needed to keep them in business, keep them alive, and they are our conduit to our audience. So it's a partnership that has a two-way street. So that we launched our first virtual title on March 18th. It was back Corral. It's since done north of $100,000 on Kino Marquee, which is, I estimate, a third or 25 to 33% of what it would have made in physical cinemas. And I see that trend. I see that, it's all hypothetical, of course, but looking at what other films have done over the last 6 months, that's kind of the rule of thumb I have been using. But honestly, that's better than zero. And we've made it up in volume because they're smaller revenue streams. So Kino Marquee was at its peak, it was in over 300 theaters. Many theaters are starting to create their own platforms now, and we're playing with them on their platforms. It's all about virtual cinema and getting our films to the audience. And we've closing in on $1 million in gross ticket sales since March. So, it's a lot, but that's like a film a week. So it's a lot of little revenue streams. So we're aggregating multiple revenue streams, and I see the theaters are aggregating multiple revenue streams. It was very good at the beginning because the audiences were very excited about continuing to support their local theaters. And that was, part of the pitch. I think that tapered off to some extent during the summer. I think a lot of us held back some of our bigger titles because at that point, I think we thought the theaters were going to reopen at the end of July, and then we thought they would open at the end of August. So it was a kind of no man's land in there, and now we're getting back on track we realize, unfortunately, that we're going to be in this a lot longer than any of us anticipated. So we're now upping our game again, and we realize this is how we're going to be releasing theatrically for the coming months. I mean, with the announcement from Regal this morning, shutting down their 540 odd screens in the US, it's devastating. Well, I can talk about particular Israeli films, but you want to save that for another segment, eh?
We'll continue, but Michael, first of all, congratulations. I think it was 2 weeks ago you released God of the Piano, but by Itai Tal, the wonderful film. So to continue the virtual cinema and the talk, please tell us how it works. How did you jump in to this journey of virtual cinema?
Well, I mean, as Wendy said, we basically had the same idea at the same time. Kino had been developing their Kino Now platform, so they had a sort of a ready-made technical solution in place. And we have Film Movement Plus, which is a subscription video on demand service that we have, which is very, very tiny. But again, we had the back-end technical platform in place that allowed us to offer basically film rentals, which is what virtual cinema is. And we reached out because we did have a film that had just opened. We had several other films that were in release, Corpus Christi, the Academy Award nominated Polish film, and Zombie Child was finishing up, and The Wild Goose Lake was just opening, and some revivals as well. What we've seen is similar to what Wendy's mentioned, a fraction of what you would do in traditional theaters. And we've also seen a really steep tapering off over the summer. And I think there are a couple of reasons for that. One is that people, I think, were more outside, enjoying being out and what the weather permitting. And I think that there's also just the theaters which are doing this with us have so many releases that they're doing now. I don't feel that there's as much emphasis on any individual film. Because everybody's doing virtual cinema. I mean, not everybody necessarily, but lots of film distributors, and not just film distributors. Some filmmakers are doing it on their own, or film producers. So there's just a lot of content out there, and that's putting aside the new Netflix movies that go on and the new films on Hulu and Amazon Prime and straight to iTunes or Apple TV and other transactional platforms. So there's a lot of competition for consumer eyeballs now, and the difficulty, I think, for all of us as film distributors is that the differential of, well, I can see this in a movie theater on a big screen is gone, and so now you just have another rental transaction that you can see on your screen, and you're competing with something where you have to maybe go through a couple of steps to rent it, as opposed to just going to the app that you already have a subscription and you just start watching right away, like a Netflix or a Hulu. So I think it's and then there are of course these other bigger services that launched recently, like HBO Max, Peacock. There's a lot of stuff out there for people to watch. I think one of our biggest concerns is how independent theaters are going to survive an unspecified period of time when they're closed. I don't know. I mean, I know that they're not making enough from virtual cinema. I don't know how they stay in business. I guess it depends whether they own their buildings or not. But it's really a difficult time for movie theaters. You can imagine if these big chains are closing with the resources they have, and some of them are publicly traded, what are the independent theaters supposed to do? So we're concerned about what is the landscape in the long term, what's it going to look like, and how do we make our films stand out in this huge sea of online content? And it's always been challenging for independent film to stand out, but now I think even more so.
Yes, so maybe later, maybe Lela, I know film festivals many times in the States are related to artist theaters. So I would love later on to hear about your take, what's going on with the situation of the artist theaters that always struggling, and now it's really hard to know. So thank you guys for doing this virtual cinema, first of all. And I want to add Eric and Kelly, and Eric, Wendy I just remember now that last year you had Peanut Butter Falcon, that was a huge indie in 2019, and it was also last year in Haifa Film Festival. So I just
wonderful. Yeah, that was one
I
of my.
saw it in Haifa. By the way, I saw it in Haifa Film Festival last year.
Oh, that's
And
great.
Wendy mentioned now that Regal, for the audience, Regal, I think, please tell me if I'm wrong, the biggest chain next to AMC of film theater in North America. Film theaters, I think, more than 500 film theaters, and they're postponing, they're shutting down until 2021, I guess.
Yes.
And Eric, you have big films. Many of them, I guess, are there. And I'm going to jump later to Kelly. What are the new platforms? You have a new big film. What are you doing? Like, are you waiting? Are you sending it to VOD? Please, all of us want to hear it.
All of the above. I mean, it's a very scary time. I mean, obviously they made that announcement with Regal, and I think I was reading this morning that it's, I want to say, is it a number right? 45,000 jobs. Like, I mean, we're talking about like a lot of people that potentially are going to lose jobs, and so this is very serious and very grim, and obviously the health situation is very serious. So that's first in our minds, of course, but you know, our company's wired a little differently in the sense that we're very much focused as a theatrical boutique, and wherever that has led us in terms of content, and Peanut Butter Falcon being a really good example of something that's not a traditional art film. It's more of a kind of populist, fun adventure. And so we've always been designed to do films that we think can kind of break out of the pure kind of indies into something a little bigger. But that puts us in a pretty precarious spot now, because that's really challenging when people can't go to the theater. I do think there's so much content out there, curating, kind of breaking through. There's always been wonderful synergies between kind of the theatrical experience, and it starts with, you know, great indie cinemas, but also going to the big chains. And we've been really focused on forging those partnerships, both on the marketing side, and the theater chains are getting increasingly sophisticated as being marketing partners as well. And then on the flip side, of course, I would be remiss to mention that we're always curating on the backs of the film festivals. So Leila's, you know, it's rare that we'll take on a film that hasn't been through the gauntlet of all the programmers and people who are, you know, finding these great films. So it's a really wonderful kind of ecosphere for us, but it's broken down right now. And so we've tried kind of all of the above. We had a film that was about to be released, a very big kind of self-help book in, I think, worldwide. It's called The Secret. And we had a film based on The Secret with Katie Holmes and Josh Lucas. We're partially owned by Lionsgate, so they're always interested in sort of trying new things, and that's taken us into very interesting places over the years. We were one of the first companies ever to do a day and date release with margin call, so it's not like we're only trying to do one thing. But anyway, so when we saw that the Secret, probably with it being released in April, wasn't going to work, we pivoted to a premium VOD. That's in partnership with Gravitas Ventures, and then Lionsgate spearheaded a PVOD release of that film, and it's done extremely well in home entertainment. It's just, I think it's like perfect comfort food for the moment. So, you know, the numbers keep coming in, but if you look on iTunes, it's been, you know, in the top 4 or 5 in the last 3 months. So that's been wonderful. And then we did do a theatrical release of a film that we wouldn't necessarily usually take on, but we felt like it was an opportunity. We work a lot with a producer, LD Entertainment, and we've done 11 projects with them. So they made a young adult film called Words on Bathroom Walls about a young man dealing with the onset of schizophrenia. And yet it's a wonderful sort of coming of age film. So we thought, well, maybe there's an opportunity to put that in theaters in August, because younger people are more likely to go back to the theaters first, once again, thinking as a partner to the theaters. So we put that out on over 1,000 screens. I think it got up to 1,500 screens, and it got a fair amount of attention. And I think the box office has been okay. I think it's, I can't remember exactly where it is. It's between 1 and 2 right now. But it's still on screen, and we've had reasonable treatment. I mean, ironically, there were, I think, over 3,000 sites that were online at one point in the United States. So, I mean, it's not like the theaters were completely shut down in August. People were trying. So that was plan number 2, try something theatrical. Plan number 3 was a film that we acquired in Sundance called The Glorias, which we realized this summer that the older audience, that's a film about the activist and journalist Gloria Steinem. And it's directed by Julie Taymor, who is known for many things, but including The Lion King. And that was a film we realized just was not going to be a fit for a theatrical experience this fall. And it's about a political activist. And so we really wanted it to be out this fall. And we had that discussion with the filmmakers. So we basically flipped it to Amazon Prime. And so it came out last week on Amazon Prime. And you know, it's bittersweet because we had really great theatrical plans for that and a whole commitment, and we were really excited, and I'm happy that everybody can watch it, and we've had tremendous outreach from a lot of groups who, you know, love Gloria and want to celebrate her, and it's a wonderful film, but it's not, you know, it's not what we were wanting it to be when we acquired it, just being totally honest. And then we had another film that we pushed to February called The Courier with Benedict Cumberbatch. And so we're hoping that we'll have enough going on in February and that we'll be through the worst of this. But we'll see. We're just gonna see what happens, but it's a very scary time for us. I don't see us launching our own platform. You know, we have a wonderful relationship with Lionsgate, so there's all sorts of things we can do. I think there's tremendous synergies to be had with the streaming partners. It's just, I think it's going to take a will on their part to want to forge these relationships with companies like ours, because I think, you know, we're talking about big sea changes and kind of the economic model of releasing movies and content and curation and all of the things that we do. And I think we see it a lot in, I mean, you just saw it with HBO and the new, you know, corporate structure there. They kind of swept everybody out, even though they've had this amazing track record of creating television. I think there's a mentality of, okay, let's just disrupt and sweep out all the old and bring in the new, and you know, don't think about partnerships as much. And so I think there's also a countervailing thing, which is let's try, let's experiment, let's forge relationships, let's listen to one another, and we hope that that's ultimately what prevails. But it's all TBD.
Okay, Eric, wow, listen, this is, it's a lot of information. It's like, you know, I thought, now myself, I'm even more in limbo because, you know, you opened a lot of questions. And although we're saying we're rethinking, we really need to think. And by the way, now I'm going to tell the viewers, we're open now to questions. You're welcome to send us questions, and we will, I will choose the question. It's not a democracy. I'll see what's the best question, and I will ask our professionals. So, and later on, I do want to hear, I want to elaborate now more, Wendy, Michael, Tom, after what Eric is saying. But now I'm going to Kelly, you just heard Eric, and you're like, I'm letting you now. You know, you have like 4 distributors, and someone is like a distributor come to you today with a film, and now everything is changed, and also your work is changed. So I want to hear, like, are you sitting with them and tell them, listen, this is what needs to be done. We need to rethink. So really, from the publicist perspective, what are you doing? What is the work methods now? As well, by the way, with film festivals, because films many times are starting their journey in the film festivals. And I feel like if the big film festivals are going like this and the smaller are going like this, please, from your perspective, what's going on?
Okay, well, I will say, as you said, I work with a number of distributors, and listening to this panel, imagine that I'm a journalist. That's what they're being hit with every single day. Roadside's doing this many pictures, Kino's doing this many. And a lot of the publications have had to lay off a lot of people and furlough a lot of people. So there are some major newspapers in this country with 1 reviewer, and will do 1 review a week. So in that sense, everything's contracted. There are also a lot of publicists who used to work at film festivals who are now in a different realm. So in one sense, the good news for me is my work hasn't changed. I've always worked with smaller distributors, and I've always had to deal with a niche market and finding a way to get people to watch these films, because they're not, a lot of them do premiere at Sundance or Toronto or wherever, but but we also used to all be sort of geographic. You know, I would do New York and Los Angeles, and someone else would do San Francisco. So what's happening in my world is we've become these teams, I guess, and that's how I met you. We met on Aviva, which was supposed to be at a festival and then wasn't. So I become part of a team with a festival publicist and a studio publicist. So that part's different for me, because I've always been like a 1-person machine. And it's kind of fun, I guess, in this time of isolation to work with a lot of people. So again, back to journalists, you know, they're inundated. It's pretty crazy. So I have to find a way to make a film not just be a film, which comes down a lot to marketing as well as publicity. Some of the films that have done best during this virtual cinema time they have to be an event. And because I work in theater and run a film festival, that works for me to create an added value to any film. So some films end up with a chef tasting menu, or a place you can order the food that's actually being served in the film. We're doing that right now with Wayne Wang's film, which is coming out in a couple of weeks, called Coming Home Again. He has a 3-star Michelin chef in it. So we are working with that chef to create a tasting menu that people can actually order online, or we're telling them which restaurants are in their area. So I suppose that's it. I mean, I have to make a bigger splash. I can't just, send a press release. So having a team is useful, because I'm talking to people from across North America now. It's been great actually working in Canada. It helps a lot. There's a beautiful radio network there. So I've been really happy to be, I'm from there, so I'm happy to be back in touch, to not be just so geographical. What I would say in terms of success of my clients, beyond making events and making it bigger than just a film, there's a lot, even with some of my journalists, I really need to say, a lot of people don't know the difference between virtual cinema and SVOD or Netflix. And, I even did a Facebook poll with journalists and friends, and like, I don't know what virtual cinema is. So if I were to say anything to this panel and everyone, that's where the work is. I think there needs to be a marketing plan industry-wide, explaining to people that you don't need to watch this on your laptop. You can watch it on a bigger monitor, because I think that's what's keeping people away. But similarly, I work with a couple of distributors who are releasing a film a week. So there's a lot of content. They play for a lot longer. They don't end after 10 days. So the urgency is gone, which helps in the long run with revenue. But yeah, I mean, it's a scramble. Some of it's fun, like I said. Some of it is, I feel for the journalist. I always see myself as a representative of the audience, not of the filmmaker. I think the distributor represents the filmmaker, and I represent the audience. So my job is to make sure they know about a film and find out why they want to watch it. And my brothers and sisters in journalism are in my heart right now. I'm happy that I've known a lot of them for a really long time. I actually started at Kino on the VHS release of the Buster Keaton films. So in their boardroom, Don. So I want to say that too. I've been through steps of this industry to VHS, to DVD, to SVOD, to virtual cinema. And I remember in the 90s having conversations like, oh, we're done. We're done for. That's it. Everybody sell your house because you're not going to have a job in 2 years. And it doesn't happen. We find ways we're creative people. We find ways to recreate what it is. There's always a phoenix. And I think that if we all get on a page, that will happen with virtual cinema. The end.
Well, yeah. Okay. So, I'm taking all this. Now I'm really sorry that we didn't bring, for next time, a representative from the art house theaters. But all of you are working with them, and I want to shift it because all of this, everything is about content. And now I hear you, Kelly, there is so much content outside. And now even more, everyone theoretically are equal on the,
that's the thing I forgot to say. So if you use the New York Times as an example, there used to be a differentiation between what was released where, theatrical versus SVOD versus DVD. There isn't anymore. Everything is going into the same cipher to these journalists. Sometimes they review a film and they don't even know what platform it's on because they're, and I have to clarify it or correct it at the end. So that is the other thing. There's the bloggers of the world who have done SVOD and DVD are very much the market right now for journalism. But yeah, you're all in the same pile now. It's not three separate.
Okay, so thank you. Before we're gonna go to some, we have many questions. So I'm gonna ask a question, four of you, I'm gonna read the questions and I'll come back. So I'm gonna ask a question and it's going to, I really wanna hear Tom, Michael, Wendy, and Layla about content. And Wendy and Michael, you particularly, you're doing a lot, and thank God that you're doing a lot of art house theaters, foreign language films. Many of Israeli films are going through you, but now it's our very hard days. And also Tom, in Canada, and also Lela from the film festival perspective, are we talking about content? Does those films can still survive? And I'm being very honest. I want an honest answer. Does this films, the more artists can survive today in your platforms? So let's start with Tom, moving to Michael, and we'll go to the ladies after that.
So we find, as everyone on this panel knows, the kind of films that we all distribute tend to appeal to older audiences. And it's older audiences who are more nervous about going to the cinema because they're higher risk at catching the virus. So it's been pretty tough trying to get audiences out for that. One of our suppliers is Lionsgate, and they tend to have films that are often for slightly younger viewers than many of the films we have. But of course, Lionsgate has pushed all of their product into next year. So a lot of the films that we would have been able to release this year, we're not able to. Same with Sony Classics. So we are, working mostly with Canadian films and other independent acquisitions that, again, still are appealing to older audiences. Although one of the strange ironies is that in Canada, at least, I can't speak for the United States, but in Canada, there has not been, to my knowledge, a single infection happening in any movie theater. And it seems that one of the most safest things to do during this pandemic that's indoors is go to a movie. Cineplex and the other theaters that I'm aware of have done a fantastic job of, again, making sure on a public health perspective that things are sanitized, that you have a limited number of people in the auditoriums and in the lobbies at any given time. And so it's too bad that attendance hasn't gone up because going to the movies is a very safe thing to do right now. In addition, in Canada, although Montreal just reclosed again, all of the other major cities in Canada have movie theaters that are open. So, we do have the ability to open our films pretty much everywhere, which is great. So, we still have quite a few films to open between now and the end of the year. And we're trying to play them wherever we can. We have a Canadian film opening this week where we're definitely getting more theaters than we would normally, simply because there's just not that much product out there. So for the films that we have that are not based on a US supplier like Sony Classics or whomever, we are able to pivot and get the film out there to some degree. Whether it does any business or not, we'll see. Yeah, huge.
Yeah, but Tom, you know, I am going to make it a little bit harder on you, because do you think that one of those, if it's Sony Picture Classics or you don't need to talk on their behalf, but do you think now they're going to take the risk and to bring a foreign language film, or we're going to see now this just American content, North American content? And I'm talking it from our perspective, the international film industry arena, that are very, very worried at the moment.
Yeah. Well, another supplier of ours is Magnolia Pictures, who are still releasing films, although they have more of a day-and-date VOD model going on right now. No, I mean, they're not opening theatrical foreign language films right now. Sony Classics has pushed everything. I think the next Sony Classics title on our docket isn't until December, and I suspect that will probably move. And this is the situation, and it's hard because, you know, as long as New York and LA are shut down, large, you know, and even smaller films and bigger films, any films are going to be mostly pushed back until then. And so here in Canada, we're kind of screwed, because although we're trying our best to get the theatrical experience chugging along, it's hard to do it without the product, and it's even harder for exhibitors like Cineplex when they don't have large films to open. You know, Regal is going to be closing all their theaters, and I'm hoping Cineplex doesn't, but it's going to be really, really tough for Cineplex to keep going without, you know, the Bond film or any other major tentpoles to open.
Thank you. Wendy and Michael, many Israeli and international filmmakers are looking at you at the moment and want to hear really want to, you know, not like a picture perfect, but want to hear your take. First of all, you are a business and you need also to get paid. You need to get money. So it is a business. So we all very want to understand what's going on. What do you think is going to the next year, 2 years from now? Or should filmmakers start to even to think more outside, for, you know, to make less artsy films and to make much more mainstream films? It's a content question from your perspective.
And also, perhaps, why do you distribute Israeli films? What does your audience find in them that you think is good for you to distribute, if you can find something in common?
Well, I mean, I'll say that I don't think filmmakers should try to necessarily make more commercial films. I mean, you know, if you look at, for example, French films for a second, the most commercial French films in France, I don't think are typically travel well to the US. Like, talking about French comedies, French action films. For the most part, they don't really work here, because the audience that wants to see a mainstream commercial comedy or action film here is, they got a lot to choose from that's in English. Why should they watch one that's in French? I think what distinguishes films and makes films work in other countries is the uniqueness of their vision, something that differentiates them from everything else and makes it worth seeing, even though it is in Hebrew or French or what have you. So, you know, I think for us that you know, saying more commercial, and of course that's what that means is also, you know, kind of a big range of things perhaps. But I wouldn't say that that's what should be happening. I mean, if we want more commercial films, we'll go to AFM, we'll buy a bunch of American genre films, and we're done. We don't need foreign films, you know, if that's all we're thinking about. But there are, you know, films can work at a commercial level, whether they're quote unquote commercial films. You know, I think all of us have had that experience.
I'd like to go back to something that Eric raised about the Glorias and art house films skewing older. And I mean, we are art house distributors. We're not going to change our brand just for what I hope will be a finite phenomenon. And the art house audience skews older, and the older audiences are going to be the most reluctant to go back to the art houses or to any movie theaters. I've been monitoring, as I'm sure all the distributors on the panel have, the box office figures of the physical theaters, and Landmark in particular, our one art house chain, and the numbers are dismal. We're doing better numbers virtually. So we're sticking to our knitting. I will say that in this period, we acquired only two, we had a pipeline that existed already. We acquired 2 films specifically for the virtual platform, and those were both documentaries. Our thinking being that a documentary came to some extent pre-branded, content-driven. People knew what they were going to get, and in fact, we were borne out. Well, this week we opened the documentary about Oliver Sacks, and it's done over $50,000 in 10 days, which has been a big uptick over the last few virtual releases. But earlier on, we picked up the Helmut Newton film, Denise Ho film. It's more difficult, and this goes back to what Kelly was saying about eventizing features. It's much more, it's always been more difficult to create a profile for a feature film than for a documentary film, which is sort of it's baked in what it's about. And the loss of the festivals has been devastating, I think, more for the feature filmmakers, the young, that it's hard to break through. I mean, our last Israeli co-production release was Synonyms by Nadav Lapid. We picked it up, it's mostly in French. We picked it up because it won the Golden Bear in Berlin, not because it was an Israeli film. We are working very hard at figuring out how to eventize our next few releases, and we have some ideas. And I think we can look to what TIFF did with the press and industry screenings, where it literally there was a 48-hour period, and we had to watch the film in that 48 hours. I think they were really smart about that. Metrograph is doing something similar in New York, where they are having the film is really just available on one night. I don't know how much traction they're getting, but they are trying that. One of the big problems, I think someone said it, is that when we started this, we thought a film was going to open on Friday and close on Thursday, the same way there was sort of a must-see, a time-delimited must-see. But then when people realized, the theaters realized they had unlimited shelf space, unlimited screen space, they didn't have to kick it out. They could just keep it there. And I think it is very problematic that each theater's portal has begun to look like a mini TVOD platform. A little mini curated iTunes. And I'm hopeful that as theaters, and the trend right now is that theaters are setting up their own portals now. They're migrating away from the distributor portals. And, always waxing optimistic, I'm hopeful that will invigorate their commitment to promoting the films on their own platform. We'll see. How is it changing our acquisitions? It's not. We're sticking to our guns, but why do we pick up Israeli films? Because there's an enormous overlap in the United States between Jewish audiences and art house audiences. So we know that any film, and there's a very, very robust Jewish film festival circuit. I mean, we can, close to $100,000 on the Jewish film festival circuit alone with the right title. Now, of course, those aren't the synonyms, or we had Tikkun, Rabin the Last Day. Those are a little tough for that. The Jewish film festivals tend to skew a little bit more, little more mainstream than those very challenging films. But it's still, all things being equal, given a high quality art film that was from, country X, and a high quality art film from Israel, there's that extra added niche marketing opportunity for an Israeli film that we are definitely aware of and look for. I think I'll leave it there.
Thank you. So I'm going
to say exactly what Wendy just said about Israeli films. It's the same with us as well. The same calculation.
And Michael, really, from all of us, we really wish you that God of the Piano will do great. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful film, and I'm so happy you took it. And it got a wonderful New York Times review.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting film to talk about just for a second, because when we picked it up primarily just to use use it in the Jewish Film Festival market. And we weren't initially thinking about it as a theatrical release, because not every film we pick up we release theatrically. One of the benefits of virtual cinema is that the costs involved with doing it are very, very low compared to traditional theatricals. The revenues are much lower too, but at least the costs are lower. So we decided to take God of the Piano and put it out in virtual cinema. And we got about, I don't know, 50 or 60 theaters signed on, and we got a critics pick review from Glenn Kenny in the New York Times. So that's something that happened with this film that would never have happened before, because we wouldn't have taken it out theatrically to begin with. But still, it is very challenging, as Kelly mentioned, to get these things covered in the press. So while the New York Times covered it, a lot of other outlets didn't, because they are sort of covering all of this stuff that's being thrown at them. And that's talking about, the content choices. We're talking about all the new things. That's without even talking about the vast catalogs that are online for people to look at as well. And we've seen that a lot of people are looking at catalog, because our catalog digital business has gone up substantially since the pandemic started.
Mm.
Oh, Leland, does film festivals today, I think, I don't know, I would love to hear from your thought, is becoming much more influential in the industry, because you have a lot of power in virtual cinema, on drive-in. Do you feel that film festivals today and in the future are going to change the way they curate films? Do you know your audience better now or less?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because as many have mentioned, the audience for film festivals is typically in that older category, and they aren't going to be the ones who want to come out and have these in-person experiences going forward. So again, a really important thing for us all to collaborate on is cultivating new audiences, and that's hard when, as mentioned, there is so much content out there already. But I think it's almost too soon to tell. I know I've heard some programmers say that they're just not the right programmer to program for an online festival, and really digging deep into figuring out what kind of programmer you are and what your audience wants. I've been taking some notes just based on stuff that you've all said, but I think that one thing that festivals have always had an advantage over cinemas is that eventizing of film. And any festival would be paired with a panel or a party or something like that. And you see cinemas now trying to scramble to put these together, but for festivals, I'm sure this is the case all over the world, they are used to doing that, and they're used to creating these events around cinema. And from an art house point of view, I can speak to, I guess another point is that festivals have this direct line to a lot of filmmakers. So while maybe the festivals are using, a small percentage of their films are like sort of tentpole films, award season films, they also have a direct line to filmmakers that cinemas don't have. So the content that they're curating can be very different than what you find at your local art house cinema, just because they're getting these submissions from filmmakers all over the world, and they're cultivating these relationships. But from an art house point of view, I can just say on a very, very, very micro level, I have a little art house cinema that I run on the side, and it's a micro cinema, and it's 30 seats in normal days. I just opened it back up last week for 10 seats, masks required, fans and everything. And we showed 3 sold out screenings of RBG. Granted, it's 10 people per film, but how many tickets did I sell for any virtual cinema that I did? Like a very, very small fraction of that. So I do think there is a desire for people when it's safe and people, in general feel safe to come out, we're going to have to work really hard to prioritize audiences coming back to the cinema, because our competition is going to be bars and restaurants and live music and things like that. And we have to figure out as an industry how we can make them feel safe in the cinema, but also, how we can prioritize this communal gathering around film, when for the last 6 months we've been off the rails with just everything is online and everything is just thrown at us. So, and again, to somebody, I think Tom said, you know, for my own micro cinema in Wichita, when everything in New York and LA is shut down, I'm not getting any new films, but Magnolia's been great, IFC's been great, but you know, I'm looking for content, and there are audiences hungry all over the world and all over in these smaller regional pockets who, like right now, since Regal shut down, it's just the AMC and my micro cinema in this community showing films in person, and they're clearly, and the drive-in, but they're clearly people who are hungry for this content. So I think that we have to, you know, while we should be focusing on virtual cinema, we have got to be looking forward to late 2021, 2022, how we're going to get audiences back in theaters.
And I just want, just a small comment between the relationship of a film festival, not, we all think, and I'm saying it to all the filmmakers, everyone are hanging Cannes, Venice, the Berlinale, TIFF, but only a small percentage go to, like what, even 1% And I'm saying all that because Wendy, a few years ago, I don't remember the name of the film, you made a film about the Jewish community in South Miami. You remember?
Well, we released it, The Last Resort. Mm-hmm.
The Last Resort, about the Jewish community in South Miami, and today it's changed. And I remember I asked you, how did you get this film? And you told me that someone from the Miami Jewish Film Festival recommended to you. And this is beautiful because there is, through the small film festivals, and it's a big Jewish film festival, but through the other that are not the usual suspect of Margaret, a film got a distribution. So this is wonderful. And hopefully, Lela, we will see it comes from the smaller film festivals. Okay, so I'm being shouted now that I need to ask some questions. So I'm going to ask Eric, and please, all of you, we don't have a lot of time, so try to be precise. I'm going to ask you two questions, Eric. I think you're going to be right with them. One, economics aside, how much consideration do you give the filmmakers, their preferences and requests during the distribution process, which is very interesting. And the second question is, distribution as an order to it, decision based on a festival chain of command. How do you see it now? What happens now with premieres and exclusive screenings? Maybe we got a lot of answers for this question, but please start with the first question about working with the filmmakers.
Yeah, just to make it clear, these are audience viewers questions.
Yeah, this is very interesting. I think for all of us, we have to strike a balance between being collaborative and bringing our expertise to the table. I mean, we always try to start off, you know, our filmmaker meetings with a joke, which is like, we are the put the butts in the seats people, and we're very focused on that. We're not a nonprofit. We try to give people an orientation about who we are, and we're willing to say this even in our meetings at Sundance where we're trying to buy the film. And that is the perspective that we're going to be bringing to this process. So if you know, for example, on a trailer or poster, the collaboration, it can be extremely productive to have the filmmakers' notes. Sometimes they have a perspective on the film that we don't necessarily have. For example, we released a film with Sally Field called Hello, My Name is Doris. And it's just this wonderful comedy. And we made a really great comedic trailer. And the director, Michael Showalter, said, I love this trailer, which is always a good way to approach, you know, start with the positive. But I think that there's a note about Doris and her past and a certain note of sadness that really belongs in this trailer. So we tried it, and it ended up being much stronger. We all felt like that was great. Now, sometimes collaboration can kind of spiral out of control. So I think from the standpoint of the filmmaker, you have to really separate your movie. Obviously, if we were asking for cuts in a movie, that would be a completely different conversation. But when we're talking about marketing materials, this is what we do, and we kind of have to run the ship. So from thinking about it from a filmmaker perspective, you have a certain amount of input you can have, and you try to make that you need to make that the most productive it can be. And ultimately, I think you have to come away, we all have to work to maintain a positive relationship, because there's always going to be bumps in the road. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. You know, in our releases, sometimes we're working with people for a year. In the case of, for example, Judy, that we were involved with during production, it can be a 2-year process. And so we have to live with each other. And so that's a collaboration. And there's many decisions to be made about where are you going to premiere the film? How are you going to manage the press days? Who's going to be there? Certainly in an awards campaign, I remember, you know, going back to Winter's Bone, we had this incredible performance from Jennifer Lawrence, and this great ensemble cast, you know, and a filmmaker that was really committed to a truly independent vision. So how do you balance those two when you have a star just like rocketing before your eyes, and every magazine and all that wanting to cover, with this incredible kind of, you know, independent spirit? So I think for us, we have to always try to be open to new ideas and open to listening. And yet, you know, on some level, it's a train that has to keep moving forward. And so we try to be as respectful as we can, while knowing our responsibility is to get everybody through the marketing process. And that might include, you know, creative materials, publicity strategy, festival strategy, distribution strategy. How many screens are you opening on? How's it going to roll out? There's so many aspects and so many decisions, and you know, you do your best, but ultimately the truth is that the filmmakers are not running, they don't get to run roadside attractions. You know, that's not the deal.
Yes, Tom, please.
I was just going to add to what Eric was saying too, is since the pandemic started, you know, we work with different Canadian filmmakers, and we're involved in their films right from, you know, production. And I found there's some who are like, you know, want to keep pushing the release back, hoping that the pandemic will end soon and then we can get bigger box office later. And then there are other filmmakers who say to us, well, can we just hurry up and open the damn film now? Because I don't know how long this thing's going to last. So let's just get the thing out there. And it's really been interesting to me to see how certain filmmakers have completely different polarizing opinions of how they want to release their films during, you know, this insane time frame. It's been kind of interesting.
You know, Kelly, I think about it. I have many, and I'm continuing what the guys told her. I have many friends in New York, publicists, and I remember one time I called in a friend, and she was very pissed, and she said, and I asked her, what's going on? She said, I just got a phone from one of the filmmakers. He think he hired me, and he think he's getting now the New York Times, the LA Times, the Washington Post, and he did. What's going now? Do you work with the filmmakers directly? Do you put them aside? Even now more than you talked about it before, but please elaborate from the conversation that goes now.
I do work with them more now. I don't know if it's, again, because everybody's got a bit of panic about the future. So I have a lot of those kind of conversations. As I said, they come with a lot of publicists attached to them too, who have a plan. And when it's good, they come with a list of personal contacts, and they're like, I know this guy at NPR, I know this person at CBC, should I call them? And I'm like, absolutely. At this point, all hands on deck. Whereas in the past, I probably would have said no. Like, but I now feel, again, poor journalists, we're sort of tag teaming them, you know, like 3 of us will send the same press release with different names on it, which we would have never done in the past. That would be, usually there's a big battle, like don't step in my, you know, don't get in my lane. But now there's like, please get in my lane. You may have 10 people on your list that I don't have. And it's been a little bit more effective. Yeah, but they have aspirations that I do say. My longest joke has been, please don't ask me if I'm sending it to the New York Times, because I wouldn't have this job if I hadn't already thought about that. So, you know, if you have asked, if again, as Wendy said, if a film is a specific demographic, for lack of a better word, and people have connections, again, I think that relates more to marketing. Because one of the most effective marketing tools ever still is an email blast to the specific person who's interested in that film. So we do a lot of that on that end and on the social media end with the filmmakers and tagging people and all that kind of stuff.
Well, thank you. And Eric, I just want to piggyback what you said about the trailer. I remember in the beginning when we wanted to do this panel, just distributors, and I remember we talked in Ruti, this panel, we had like all kinds of adaptations. In the beginning, we said we're going to do case studies of Israeli films that did it, but then we said enough with what's been. Now we're going to the future, what's going on. But I do want to mention regarding trailer that I remember a few years ago, there was a small drama film in Israeli, Through the Wall, from a very established filmmaker, Rama Burstein, that were filmed before that filled the void, one in Venice, the best actress. And then you took the film, we have it here, but we're gonna skip it. We'll send it to everyone. We have the trailer of Through the Wall here, and it looks like a small moving drama. And then Roadside Attractions got in, took the film, made the best trailer, and it's called The Wedding Plan, and it's a romantic comedy. And it made a lot of money in the artists. So thank you. I think you nailed it about regarding trailers, because the trailer looks good, and both of them are looking good. But this is how to approach to your audience, basically.
But also, I want to give credit to Rama Burstein, who was just such a wonderful, and the whole production team. I mean, they were just such wonderful collaborators and so excited about what we were doing and so supportive. And it's very, very hard to do this. If you're doing something like a title change, we also worked on the subtitles. We did all sorts of things to try to make a sort of more commercial sell of the movie. It's very, very difficult to do something like that if you don't have the support of the filmmakers.
Ran, don't you want to show the trailer just to have fun for a few?
Guys, so let's put let's put the first minute of the through the wall, and then let's jump to the first minute in The Wedding Plan. It's the same film. So let's watch it.
אני מתחתנת בנר שמיני של חנוכה.
אבל מי החתן?
יש לי אולם, יש לי סמלה. קטן על השם להמציא לי חתן עד נר שמיני של חנוכה.
הוא יכול, אבל אולי הוא לא רוצה. מה את רוצה?
להתחתן.
בלי שקרים.
אני רוצה אהבה. טוב, אסף, מה אתה מחפש בבחורה? תחברי את כל הפגישות שהייתי בהן, זה יוצא שאני בדייט של 400 איש.
רוצות לראות את הנחש?
כן! בנות, מי מוכנה ללטף את אבי? לא.
אז מה, עוד לא התחלתם? טוב, אני במשרד שלי אם אתם צריכים משהו.
מעולה, תודה.
הכל בסדר?
מעולה.
נכון, אוקיי. חידה. מה קורה, גידי?
אני לא רוצה להגיד.
אתה חייב.
אני לא אוהב אותך.
מיכל מתחתנת בנר שמיני של חנוכה, והיא עדיין לא יודעת מי החתן.
שייך, מה אני אגיד לך?
את חתנת עם גידי?
לא. קטן על השם להמציא לי חתן עד נר שמיני של חנוכה.
את חתיכת טיפוס, מיכל.
הוא יפני שהתגייר.
שלום.
טוב, אסף, מה אתה מחפש בבחורה?
את ההפך ממך.
את מוכנה להיות אשתי?
Takes me back.
Wow.
Well, we're people of faith. We believe in good endings, happy endings.
Wow, now the input that I'm taking to myself, what someone told me once, when you're doing a presentation or panel, put visual material. So now next time we're going to put much more trailers. So I'm going to continue with, and so that point taken about the trailer. So I'm going to have, we have, by the way, we have so many questions here, but those who ask questions, you're asking like questions, it's like a seminar to read it. So I'm going to take just the short
Can I just also mention, I didn't mention the producer, Asaf Amir, who's a really wonderful producer who, I mean, I think a lot of credit has to be given that the film, you know, we saw it in Telluride, so it had already been out there in the world. You know, the filmmakers just deserve so much credit for everything that happened with that film.
Yeah, and by the way, Asaf Amir Ruti, if I'm not mistaken, is the new director of the Israeli Film Academy. Am I right? I think is the. And by the way, Eric is the member of the American Academy. So someone asked, how can we reach out to you, all of you distributors? So by the way, to the Israeli filmmakers, and we have so many Israeli filmmakers that are now are nominated to the Ophir Award, the equivalent to the Oscar. So Eric, once we'll have the Israeli submissions, trust me, we know how to target you, because we want your, and so I'm going to ask, and this is a very important question. It sounds like someone in North America asked it, but it goes everywhere. And please, everyone are open to answer. How does diversity, Black Lives Matter, and Me Too influence the curation process in terms of which films to pick and when to distribute them?
That was Amir's question. Hi, Amir, I saw you. It has made a difference, and it's oddly analogous to my statement previously about having films that appeal to Jewish film festivals and Jewish audiences. There's now the people of color, the diverse audiences have spoken up. They've made themselves felt. We hear them, and you know, we are responding. So it's a moment that we can be more success. It has made it, and again, we try to be anti-racist, but we're still on, you know, we're still business people. But the moment has made it more the commercial opening, the ability to bring these kinds of diverse stories to an audience has opened up, and broader audiences are embracing them. So there's a synergy between, you know, our politics and our business acumen, so that's, you know, we have several upcoming films. We have a 1972 film by Bill Greaves, a documentary called Nation Time. We're opening in a couple of weeks right before the election. That will that is a record of the 1972 Black National Congress convention, in Gary, Indiana, and you know, Jesse Jackson gets you up on your feet. We just picked up another film by a first-time Black woman director called Test Pattern that we are going to be able to release in February, that we might not have been able to find an audience for in previous times. So, and that goes back to what Kelly said about publicity and the responsibility of the journalists. I mean, we've been extremely pleasantly surprised by the extent to which the film critics have been supporting virtual cinema from the very beginning, and we've gotten, you know, the very extensive press we need to you know, bring our films through the rest of the food chain. Then, as you said, they're starting to review everything: Vudu, YouTube, iTunes, and it has become kind of a mishmash. I wonder what's going to happen when we start going to hybrid cinemas, when theaters start to reopen, whether the degree to which the film critics are reviewing all the straight to VOD releases will pull back.
I think so. I think so.
And yeah.
I feel like everyone has the same intention, which is maintaining the survival of this industry that we are all in, because we are film people who love theaters, who love big screens. Part of me, honestly, if it were financially conceivable for everybody, I think we should all take a year off and make people miss us. because I remember, you know, after the pandemic, the Spanish flu, I don't really want people to like virtual cinema. I'm sorry to tell you all that, but the best thing for me would be if people didn't watch it, because then when we do our festivals or our, you know, our beautiful Lumley theaters or whoever, people will come back. I fear, I fear the laziness factor. So, you know, I don't want it to be too great. It should be good maybe to get us through. But as Layla said, when this is over, I really hope we all boots on the ground back to theaters and festivals.
Eric.
I just wanted to say one thing, which is that, you know, I don't think it's just about political correctness. I mean, I think the industry has been a pretty clubby industry, and I think that we're, you know, sorely in need of content to bring exciting new audiences and voices in. So it's not just about, you know, it's a very self-serving thing. I mean, for example, we acquired a film in Sundance called Dear White People, which, you know, was a kind of small independent on some level, but we co-acquired it with our partners at Lionsgate Television, and it's in its 4th season on Netflix as a series. And the whole first season is really the feature kind of expanded into I think it's 10 episodes. And it's really an exciting thing from a business standpoint. So maybe that's one way of thinking about, you know, a lot of these changes is like, I think there's so many new voices out there that have been kind of like kept on the periphery and now are kind of coming into the center. And so it's just an exciting business opportunity beyond everything else.
I want to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'm just going to keep going back to audiences because, you know, I think Eric, you mentioned like Roadside is not a nonprofit, but you look at all these film festivals and art house cinemas that are nonprofit organizations, at least in the US, and our funding models are very different than they are across the world. And, you know, I think it's one thing for a distributor to find a film and to like say, we're going to nurture this voice of a filmmaker who's you know, been historically marginalized, but we need the support in curating and finding those audiences, because there are very, very few institutional or foundational avenues of support for festivals and art house cinemas in North America, besides like the National Endowment for the Arts and the Academy. There are just not a lot of places that support the exhibitor and the curator. And I think that it's wonderful to have all of the institutional support for the filmmakers, but if you're not going to support those people who are just, you know, releasing those films and who are counted on to find those audiences, it's really not balanced yet.
I want to, by the way, Lila, I want to tell, because you mentioned you're running a micro cinema in Israel. Until last month, we have the early stage to vote to the Israeli Academy Awards. And because all the theaters were shut down, only one theater in Florentine neighborhood, it's like the Williamsburg of Tel Aviv, or even farther, like Bushwick of Tel Aviv, and two hipsters guys, 20 and 21 years old, they're running a micro cinema, 60 seats, and all the Israeli films were that cinema. So this is beautiful. Like, it was like so much under the radar, and the only theatrical experience was in a micro cinema for Academy Award members. So this is, and still I want to be optimistic about it, that it gives now the opportunity for new platforms. So it's not the solution, maybe I'm talking another perspective, theatrical for the big films, but it's wonderful that we have this opportunity specific for those things. And now I have a question, this is going to be our last question. Someone asked, I would love to ask, what is the right way to contact you? At what stage of the film? What is the most important thing for you to receive, or what is that attracts you? The question. And also, will you take more films during this new rethink and will try to distribute them directly online? Who will be the brave to answer? Will you take more films and to throw them to the online? On what stage of the film to connect you? Is it legit to yeah?
I just want to, I want to I mean, I tend to really just go to the festivals and work with the producers reps, meaning the agencies and sort of the established reps. You know, when people hand me postcards and things, you know, usually I just don't have the bandwidth to connect with that. But something that I'm on the board of Film Independent, which is an organization based in Los Angeles. It's $95 a year. It's a nonprofit. And they have all sorts of forums and ways for filmmakers to participate. And I get very involved in that and curating those projects. We have a program. I was just in Cairo last year for a program called Global Media Makers, which is, believe it or not, done in partnership with the US Department of State. So there's all sorts of exciting new initiatives and ways of bringing filmmakers together. For me, I would rather kind of work through those programs, frankly, than have just a million different emails, which I probably wouldn't respond to. And the vast majority of our movies we acquire finished. When we get something early, it's usually from a very established company. Like, for example, Judy was produced by Pathé in London. We first learned about it, I think it was at Berlin. We had read about it, but we first saw a photo of Renee Zellweger as Judy Garland, and we took a meeting at the Berlin market. And we sent that home immediately, and we all read the script and loved it. But that's extremely rare. So I think for me, you know, it's about, for filmmakers, try to associate with one of these programs like Film Independent or the IFP in New York or the Israeli equivalent. Try to work through those programs, and that's a really good way to kind of build your network.
To all the filmmakers or the distributors or industry people that watch us, I personally really recommend about what Eric said, specifically IFP, which is a wonderful way to send your project in a very, very early stage. Many of Israeli big films, all of them are small, but compared to other big, started at the IFP market. They reached out to there, someone bought them in a very early stage or later stage. So please Google it, IFP, it's just finished. It's every September between TIFF to the New York Film Festival. So mention London, and I will conclude with Wendy and Michael will jump to Europe. I know you have a relationship with those European film sales. Sometimes they're doing, you know, they're sending films. Can you please tell us, I don't know, I'm just throwing it, what's going on now with Europe? Like, how do you work with other European companies like Films Boutique or Pyramid, like equivalent in other territories? Did the pandemic change the way you work with other territories?
I mean, it's up to the sales agents, I think, learned from the time of Cannes to the time of Venice and TIFF handle their sales operations virtually. So, you know, we took many meetings, we looked at many films, and to echo what Eric said, Kino Lorber only acquires finished films. We rarely have the time or the bandwidth to look at anything that comes in over the transom. We depend on the sales agents and on the particular sales agents whom we know that are a good fit for us. We need someone else to do a first cut, and that's either a sales agent or a reputable film festival like Haifa, of course. So if a filmmaker wants to get on our radar, I suggest you either get a sales agent or come to me and say, you know, I've been in, you know, these 5 film festivals, or, you know, we monitor the major film festivals, but we can't monitor all of them. So we really need to see, we need someone else to do a first cut. We can't answer every email that we get.
Yeah, it's the same with Film Movement. I mean, we're depending on festivals and sales agents to filter the huge number of films down to something that's more manageable for us to be looking at.
I hear you. Okay, wow, those was a very, very interesting 90 minutes. And I want to say on a personal note, when there's no pandemic, usually when there's no world pandemic, I live in New York in East Village. And I remember when the pandemic just started, I live in East Village on 13th Street. I have many, many artist theaters in my neighborhood, all the best film theaters. And it was really, really devastating to see, for me personally, not just film theaters, all the culture venues closed for such a long time, and they are still closed in that particular city, but we see it everywhere, also in Israel now. And I've learned through the last few months about solidarity in this film industry, and it really touches my heart that all of you participated in, I'm saying tonight's panel, but it's just the beginning or the middle of the day. And I really want to thank all of you. And I hope we put a little bit spotlight on the Haifa International Film Festival. All the films there, by the way, in the Israeli competition are closed. So,
but the industry events, tomorrow we have our grand international pitching forum for 1:15 Israeli time to 6 o'clock, 13 amazing projects. It's the beginning. Just before distribution, we need to think of an idea for the film.
So before I'm giving to Ruti to wrap it up, I'm really thank you, all of you, to Leila, and really best of luck with your own micro cinema. And you're really ambassador of links of all the industry, the wonderful film festival alliance that you're running, and our fellow Eric, Tom, and Wendy, and Kelly. It was a pleasure hearing such a diverse voices. And Michael, I'm sorry, it's blocked here. And Michael, thank you so much. And again, good luck with God of the Piano. And we're looking, but all of you basically are ambassadors of culture and also of Israeli films. So we really salute you and thank you so much.
Kelly has an idea. I think she wants to voice it. Kelly?
Yeah, that's just Kelly's little, before I go to bed, my little prayer. I saw it when newspapers expanded compressed 20 years ago, where every journalist was like, I'm starting my own blog. And I said, why don't you all start one blog together? And that was IndieWire. And I'm wondering again with readers, like instead of I appreciate how people have their own platform and we're ready from the get-go and it's great. But I always hope there's a way that everybody gets to be our own Netflix. Like
you have to manage it, you know.
Yeah, just have like, I don't know how you buy a television station, but everybody should do it. And
well,
you know.
I think that I hear from people who sell screens that the screens are getting bigger and bigger, and people, not affluent rich people, just, you know, average people, are having media rooms and film theaters inside the rooms. And I think in 3 to 5 years, every house will have not only a kitchen, but a media room or a film theater. And I'm not sure people will go out of the house. And, you know, I'm not sure we should be afraid of change, because change will come anyway. I think we should be prepared for change, because there will be change. So anyway, I'd like to thank all of you really for collaborating so quickly with us, for saying yes, and for being so sincere and sharing. And Eran Polishuk, I'd like to thank you for the idea, for curating, for inviting all these people, and for this great moderation. And really thank you for the pleasure of being our guests. As we promised, next year, all of us in Haifa.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for our audience who were listening, and the questions, and the whole evening. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.